Greetings and salutations, friends. This video is for those of you who are new to 40k lore, or for those of you who want a starting point. Maybe you don't know what 40k is, in which case this video will endeavour to explain some of the basics, or maybe you have a rough inkling as to what 40k is, but you have no idea where to start, which is entirely understandable, considering that many of the lore pages will ask you to read a several thousand-word essay as an introductory basic. The 40k lore universe is absolutely massive. It makes the vast majority of sci-fi universes out there look positively underdeveloped in comparison. So what we're going to do in this video is give you a quick rundown of what 40k is, and then we're going to look in very general terms at the various major factions that inhabit the 41st millennium, to see if any of them spark your interest. And if any of them seems interesting, there are a wide variety of further videos on my channel that you might look into. I have also started a lore series called 40k Explained, where I endeavoured to, well, quite obviously, explain certain elements of 40k. If you have any particular suggestions, then this is the video in which you should leave a comment. Now, of course, 40k is, as I mentioned, a massive universe, and so it will take me quite a while to go through everything, but if you leave a comment, I will eventually get to your query. So let's start with the basics, shall we? Warhammer 40,000 originated as a tabletop wargame named Rogue Trader in 1987. This was created by a company called Games Workshop as a way of trying to build upon their very successful Warhammer Fantasy franchise with a sci-fi equivalent. This version of 40k, that being Rogue Trader, is vastly different from the one we have today. In fact, the earlier versions of Rogue Trader was far more of a RPG game rather than the tabletop war game it is today, and as such, the lore additionally is in many ways quite dissimilar to what we have now. So if you ever hear myself or others refer to old lore, we are probably referring to the first 2 or 3 editions of 40k, the editions being the basic rulebooks, with Rogue Trader being the first, and then the second and third edition being created later and making the game into more of a tabletop wargame rather than its RPG origins. If I myself or someone else is talking about the Horus Heresy, or 30k lore, they are talking about the events that happened 10,000 years before the current 40k. A time period that is currently being revealed through a massive book series that is expected to end up at somewhere around 70 to 80 full-length books, of which close to 40 have been released at the time of this video's making. This video, though, is about the modern 40k universe. Today, the 40k universe has grown far beyond its humble beginning as a RPG and then tabletop wargame, and possesses a truly mind-boggling amount of lore. The depth and complexity of the 41st millennium makes 40k more than a match, and indeed an absolute giant amongst most sci-fi universes, like the more popular ones being Star Wars or Star Trek. And it presents us with a very different sort of future to these universes. This is not a universe of peaceful federations or true white sword-wielding heroes fighting against the pure dark. This is a universe of necessity, one in which the human race fights every single day against innumerable enemies. Not for principles, not for ideals, not for balance, not for lofty promises of a better tomorrow, or to vanquish evil, no. Humanity fights to survive. The promised golden age of tomorrow has already come, and it has long since passed. Now, the Imperium of Man fights a war on all fronts against the Xenos, the Heretic, and the beasts that stalk the void between the stars. Such a situation does not allow for the luxury of pure good or pure evil. Shades of grey, my friends, shades of grey. This is the gritty realism that is to me the most appealing part of 40k. Most sci-fi or fantasy universes tend to adopt a more stylized approach to building their respective universes, be it through overly simplistic idea of good versus evil, or an idealized future of progress and universal acceptance. In 40k, the most vicious of evil may have redeeming qualities. The tale of Conrad Curse, the Night Haunter, is a perfect example of this. Equally so, the most shining example of goodness and virtue might be hiding a sinister side. This realism extends through every aspect of 40k. The weapons, the vehicles, the various races virtually all possess detailed lore explaining how they operate, how they are used, and why. More importantly, there are plausible explanations based on the internal logic of the universe. There are no magical light swords or zero heat venting plasma rifles in this universe. What there is are detailed accountings of the average Imperial soldier's equipment. Then their order of battle, then the specialized squads, then their vehicles, their homeworld's history, their take on the Imperial religion, etc., etc. And then comes similar lists for the hundreds of other Imperial regiment variations. 40k is a universe where no amount of detail is ever enough, and is constantly expanding as more and more source material and books are produced. And it is this depth of information and the ever-broadening spectrum of information available that makes 40k what 40k truly is. It is not, as some people might want you to think, simply a grim dark universe. It is a realistic universe. There is hope in 40k, but it is always tempted by realism. A Tyranid hive fleet may be curtailed, it might even be destroyed, but that does not mean that the universe is saved. This is but one of many threats. Perhaps one day will come when the Imperium is once again safe and secure. Perhaps the collapse of the Imperium is inevitable, and perhaps that is for the better. It is all a question of perspective and information. But now, with that out of the way, let's look at something a bit more specific about the universe, namely the major races of the 40k galaxy. Bear in mind that many of these races have various sub-factions, and that many more alien species also exist within the galaxy. But these that I will be listing now are the major players, so to say. And we start, of course, with the Imperium of Man. While still by far the largest single and unified force in the galaxy, consisting of millions of planets, the Imperium is a mere shadow of its former self. The Imperium once fielded legions of hundreds of thousands of Adeptus Astartes, genetically modified super soldiers clad in powered armor, nearly impervious to conventional infantry weapons, and armed with so-called bolt guns, which are essentially fully automatic, man-portable grenade launchers, if your definition of a man is a massive overmusculated superhuman, that is. An Adeptus Astartes would be more than a match for dozens, if not hundreds, of regular men, and 1,000 Astartes is a force capable of conquering entire planets, hell, entire solar systems. These already ludicrously powerful soldiers were but the basic foot soldiers of the Great Crusade. Its leaders were the so-called Primarchs, godlike beings of incredible physical and intellectual might, capable not only of breaking the backs of entire armies single-handedly, but also organizing and controlling every aspect of massive offensives spanning the length and breadth of the galaxy. And these Primarchs were not born. They were created by a figure known only as the Emperor. The Emperor could perhaps best be described as the pinnacle of all human potential, dwarfing even the Primarchs in all aspects. He was an entity as close to God as the material realm has ever seen. Unfortunately, even the Emperor was not completely without fault, and after the catastrophic events of the Horus Heresy, the Adeptus Astartes are now reduced to chapters of 1,000 Marines, and the Primarchs are long gone, along with the Emperor, who is now kept atop the Golden Throne, a life support device that lets him maintain both his life and continue to aid the Imperium navigate through the stars, but precious little else. The Emperor is now arguably at his least powerful, but he is also at his highest ever when it comes to his popularity and his worship, being worshipped as a literal god in the modern Imperium, via the Imperial cult, the only legal religion in the Imperium. The burden of defending this Imperium has been shifted over to the regular human soldiers of what was once known as the Imperial Army. Today it is known as the Imperial Guard, a gargantuan fighting force consisting of tens of billions of men and women supported by hundreds of millions of tanks and aircraft, all transported to where they need to go by the might of the Imperial Navy and its kilometer-long battleships. This massive war machine is fueled by the collective efforts of 1,000 worlds, many entirely covered in massive industrial plants where millions of people toil day and night to feed the insatiable hunger of the Imperium's war machines. Living standards on many worlds in the Imperium are far beyond abysmal, and often requires the Emperor's peace to be enforced at the end of a shock mall. Make no mistake, the Imperium is not a pleasant place to live, and to make matters a bit more interesting, the Imperium is in a constant state of war against innumerable Xenos races scattered across the galaxy, as well as plentiful internal strife inside the Imperium. And speaking of internal threats, let's move on to the next faction, Chaos. Now, Chaos is far more complicated a topic than I will cover in what is supposed to be a quickish explanation video. However, I have made a video explaining Chaos in detail, and there will be various links in the description to various videos pertaining to Chaos and other things. One of which will of course be that detailed video. But for now, all you need to know is that Chaos is a primal force. It exists in a universe parallel to the real world. This universe is based on the emotions of the material universe and is granted powers over the material universe based on the amount of extremity of these emotions. And in this parallel universe, known as the Warp, there are semi-sentient entities ranging in power and intellect from mindless predators to godlike beings with armies of demons at their beck and call. The most powerful of these creatures are known as the Chaos Gods. These entities have essentially infinite power inside of the Warp, and at the same time, no power inside of the material universe. They require a window into our world to affect it. If they have this window, they can corrupt living creatures and influence them into providing them with more windows, and so on. And here's the problem. The extremity of the emotion determines the amount of power. The Chaos Gods gain it from, for example, more power is gained from a man murdering someone than one slapping someone, that being violence, and so naturally the gods would want everything to be more extreme. And the Emperor was about to stabilize the galaxy, and was about to bring order and to quiet down a lot of these emotions. Therefore, the Chaos Gods, using guile and misdirection, corrupted half of the Astartes legions to rebel against the Emperor, leading to the events of the Horus Heresy. The rebellion was eventually and extremely narrowly defeated at a great cost, but the Imperium never recovered fully, and while Chaos was technically defeated, the galaxy was still in a state of complete disarray. Fertile grounds for, well, chaos. In modern 40k, chaos is a cancer eating away at the Imperium from within. Secret cults exist on many Imperial planets, seeking to overthrow the Imperial government. But chaos is by no means limited to subversive actions. Most of the defeated Chaos forces retreated into an unstable region of space known as the Eye of Terror, to rebuild and bid their time. They have since launched many new invasions into the Imperium and have put countless worlds to the torch, with armies of demonic creatures, heretical cultists, and traitor legionaries. And speaking of Chaos Gods, let's have a look at the wonderful space elves of 40k, who created one of these godlike beings, the Eldar. They were once the favoured children of an enigmatic race of creatures known only as the Old Ones. Their technological achievements were unrivaled, and Eldar society eventually flourished into a galaxy-spanning empire, where the Eldar themselves lived in an endless luxury, while armies of automatons worked to eradicate the last few bastions of hostile resistance in the galaxy. Life was good, life was peaceful, and life was so incredibly boring. Eldar lived for a very, very long time, and in a society where everyone could live a life of luxury and safety, boredom is a fairly inevitable part of life, and so the Eldar began seeking out more extreme experiences to provoke new and interesting emotions within them. Those of you who paid attention to the last part can already see where this is going, and sure enough, the Eldar eventually created such a maelstrom of emotions within the warp that it was enough to give birth to a new chaos god, Slaanesh, the Dark Prince of Pain and Excess. This apocalyptic event shattered the once great Eldar Empire, and the race only survived much diminished on vast continent-sized spacefaring cities known as craft worlds. After fucking over every single person in the entire universe by creating a demon god, the Eldar are now a scattered race, desperately trying to hold on to the seeds of their former empire, and only simply just staying alive in a hostile galaxy. Forced to adapt to their new circumstances, the Eldar created a new way of life, where every Eldar would pick a series of paths to follow through life. For example, one might choose to become a carpenter, and will then seek to become the absolute best carpenter possible for however long it takes, and once he achieves this goal, he will quit and pick a new path. This is done to keep any Eldar from becoming complacent and bored, and therefore seeking out more extreme stimuli. The only constant in Eldar's life is one born by necessity. All Eldar must serve in the militia, although such a name cannot quite do justice to the reality of the Guardian Corps. Eldar Guardians are technically citizen soldiers, thereby militia, but having dedicated decades, if not millennia, to training, they are on average vastly more skilled and professional than virtually any standing army in the galaxy. Some Eldar, however, taking a liking to the military life and decide to pursue a specialized military path, seeking to achieve excellence in a particular field of warfare, much like the whole carpentry example, although in this case it would be skirmishing, long-range combat, or close-quarter combat. These specialized paths are known as aspects, as they represent the various aspects of the Eldar God of War. Due to the extremes of combat, Eldar are far more likely to get obsessed with these violent paths, and so they could far easier be trapped, unable to digress onto a new path. These Eldar are generally pitied by others as they have limited their own potential in life to the bloody life of a warrior. Nevertheless, these exarchs are incredibly good at what they do, making them fierce warriors and an integral part in any craftworld's defense. The Eldar are, however, not the only ones to survive the birth of Slaanesh. Their twisted cousins, the Dark Eldar, hide themselves inside the Webway, a series of wormhole-like tunnels used by the Eldar and the Dark Eldar alike to travel across the stars. Where the Eldar, however, seek to curb their excess, the Dark Cousins seek to engross themselves in all manners of horrible excess in a desperate attempt to stave off the echoing feeling of hollowness that was carved out of them by the birth of Slaanesh. They seek to fill this soulless void by feeding on the most extreme of emotions, mostly produced by putting their victims through the most horrendous of tortures. This idea of pain before anything is a philosophy they follow even on the battlefield, with weapons designed to hurt and paralyze rather than kill. A living prisoner and future victim is far more useful to them than a corpse. In fact, the only reason the Dark Eldar ever leave the safety of their Webway nests is to pillage other systems for slaves to use in their fun and games. If any race within 40k could be said to be evil, it would be the Dark Eldar. But even they do this out of necessity. rather than pure malice, or at the very least, that is how it started out. Having looked at the closest we get to evil, let's see what the closest we have to good looks like. And, well, it happens to look like a blueberry with an ass for a face. I talk, of course, of the Tau, a race of humanoids with a remarkable love for technology and communism. Those two are strange bedfellows at the best of times, certainly, but the Tau ruling class has something that Stalin was sorely lacking. Namely, a way to effectively inspire undying loyalty into every single member of society. And I really do mean complete and unflinching loyalty here. If a Tau Ethereal, that being the name of the ruling caste, ordered another Tau to take his own life, he would do so without question or hesitation. It is not known precisely how the Tau has created this collectivist wet dream, but they have most definitively done so, and the Imperium in particular are very interested in how, because they wouldn't mind some of that technology if at all possible. The Tau are further unified in their common loyalty to the so-called greater good, an ideology that demands that all members of society work tirelessly towards the betterment of all, regardless of any individual wishes or aspirations. If you are born labourer, you will remain a labourer, as will your children. With this ideology, the Tau Empire has gone from a scattered bunch of tribes busily beating each other over the head with rocks and sticks to a spacefaring empire within dozens of colonized worlds in the span of a mere 10,000 years. Unlike the Imperium, however, this rapid growth is not solely based on military conquest or absorbing the scattered remnants of humanity once lost amongst the stars. The Tau prefer to expand their borders through diplomatic annexation, bringing many new races into the Tau Empire. Of course, if these new races cannot be made to see the necessity of working towards the greater good, they must inevitably be made to do so with the barrel of a pulse rifle. But every effort will first be expended to pacify and, if needs be, dilute the occupied race to a more manageable level. After all, I said that Tau are the closest thing to good in the 41st millennium, not that they are good. They are not above a little bit of subtle ethnic cleansing, and it is important to remember that while life in the Tau Empire in many ways is far superior and more luxurious to that in the Imperium, it is also a life completely devoid of individual choice or agency. But perhaps that is a small sacrifice to make in a dark and brutal galaxy, especially one that has quite recently been made just a bit more dangerous by the appearance of a relative newcomer, the Tyranids. Every good sci-fi universe, after all, needs an implacable horde enemy, someone that can't be reasoned with, can't be convinced to live and let live through flowery diplomatic phrases. The Tyranids are just such a foe. Driven not by conquest, but by appetite, the Tyranid hive mind strips entire solar systems bare of life and resources, leaving dead, airless rocks that once were planets in their wake. And they do this by first nom-nomming any and all hostile life forms that call the planet home, by overwhelming them in a tide of monstrous creation spawned aboard the innumerable hive ships now orbiting the doomed planet. A hive fleet has virtually limitless resources at its disposal to secure its next meal, as it will have to strip several other planets of their biomass, and has all long since converted that biomass into new monstrous organisms. And as if this wasn't bad enough, the Tyranid soldiers are but the smallest part of what is essentially one massive superorganism, capable of adapting to virtually any circumstance. For example, let's say that the Tyranids have hooked their tentacles into an ice world defended by the Imperium. The first wave of soldier creatures will simply freeze to death as their hyper-fast metabolism is unable to cope with the strength-sapping temperature. Not a problem. The next wave will be insulated against the cold with thick pockets of fat that also serve as energy reserves, allowing the soldier creatures to fight on with their usual enthusiasm. The next step would be to deal with the defenders by evolving layers of carapace armor that constantly excrete a heat-resistant ooze to lessen the effect of Imperial las weaponry. And so on and on it goes in an endless cycle of evolution until the planet is scoured clean of all non-Tyranid life forms. The planet is then rinsed of all vegetation and organic matter by swarms of Ripper organisms, then once full, hurl themselves into pits of what is essentially digestive acids, where Tyranids and biomatter both are broken down and slurped up to the waiting hive ships through massive towers reaching all the way into orbit. Towers that are themselves Tyranid organisms and will in turn be reabsorbed into the fleet. Lastly, the planet's atmosphere is harvested, leaving behind nothing but a barren, dead rock. And while alien space monstrosities that devour entire planets can be fun, a good sci-fi universe also needs a bit of violent humour. And that is where the ever-lovable orc hordes come screaming into the picture. The Greenskins are a race of hyper-aggressive symbiotic creatures consisting of a bestial side, providing the muscle and, shockingly enough, the brains, while a unique species of fungus makes up most of the internal workings of the orc body. This rather unique mix results in a remarkably durable and amazingly violent creature that not only thrives on conflict but outright needs it. If orcs can't find anyone else to bash, they will happily murder each other in hilarious quantities until they find someone else to play with. It is this ever-expanding quest for new and interesting playmates that drive the orcs to expand into the larger galaxy. And while you might think that a race that is at constant and never-ending war with itself might find it challenging to squeeze in the time to develop interstellar travel in between all that murdering, the orcs are not mere animal/fungi. The orcs were engineered rather than created naturally through evolution, and inside of their genetically engineered minds is hidden all the knowledge they need to develop and build everything from crude guns to tanks to aircraft to spaceships. And the level and amount of this knowledge is based on how successful the orc, and by the extension, its tribe is. For example, a planet with hundreds of small tribes constantly at war with each other, the average technological level won't rise much above the level of single-shot rifles and a few simple vehicles and artillery pieces. Think extremely ramshackable late Renaissance weaponry. But as one tribe gains ever more power, it will gain more and more knowledge, thereby speeding their path to domination over the other tribes, until they either take over the planet or run into someone bigger and better, and therefore more worthy than themselves. In short, the orcs are genetically engineered to be the perfect fighting machines, both on a personal man versus orc level and on a strategic level. But why would such a brutish race be created, you may ask? The orcs, after all, have a hard time differentiating friend and foe at the best of times, and seems like a somewhat temperamental weapon. But the threat they were created by the enigmatic Old Ones to face necessitated a certain degree of recklessness. After all, they were created to fight against the Necrons, a race of extremely technologically advanced and essentially immortal mechanical undead. They were created from an ancient humanoid race known as the Necrontyr. They were granted immortality and an escape from their frail bodies in a bargain with godlike beings that fed on stars. What the star vampires failed to mention, however, was that the vast majority of the Necrontyr would have to sacrifice their very essence, becoming nothing but soulless and mindless mechanical puppets, used as foot soldiers in the internal war of dominance waged by their undying masters. And speaking of warfare, the Necron boast some of the most advanced weapons of murder in the 40k galaxy. Their primary small arms is the Gauze Flayer, a weapon that deconstructs whatever it hits on a molecular level, starting with the outermost layer. To an observer, anyone hit by this weapon will appear to be literally flayed alive over the course of a few seconds. and flesh and skin is not all the Gauss Flayer is capable of breaking down. It is also quite effective against armored vehicles, as even the thickest of armor plating provides little protection against a weapon capable of tearing objects apart molecule by molecule. To make matters worse, the Necrons are undead in more ways than they just look scary. When rendered unoperational, an emergency beacon inside the Necron soldier activates and teleports what remains to one of their many bases, where they are restored once more to full working order. And in some cases, the Necrons are capable of repairing themselves during combat. Just because a Necron warrior is down does not mean he will stay down. And those, gentlemen, are the short summaries of the various factions within the 41st millennium. Hopefully, one or more of these factions have sparked an interest in you, and you'll want to know more. In the description I will link to a couple large community-run websites with lots of extra lore information, and of course, there is quite a few videos on various subjects already up on my channel. Until next time, I have been Arch. Thank you very much for watching, and I do hope to see you again soon. Have a good day.